Mark chapter 4, verse 35 to the end. So, and on that day, when even was come, he said to them, "Let us go over to the other side." And leaving the multitude, they take him with them, even as he was, in the boat. And other boats were with him. That's the part I've never read, or I've read and never heard myself say it out loud. I've never considered it, but I want us to remember that other boats were with him. Some versions say smaller boats were with him, or many smaller boats, or other smaller boats. And there's rise a great storm, and wind and waves beat on the boat, insomuch that the boat was now filling with water. And he himself was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. And they woke him and said unto him, "Teacher, carest not that we perish?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, "Why are you fearful? Have ye not yet faith?" And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, "Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" We've been talking through the Gospel of Mark, and Mark is focused on showing who, man, that's loud. Move that down. Showing the world who Jesus is. You know, we've learned that. We've seen his power over unclean spirits and diseases and sickness, showing the world that he's come to heal. We've listened to his parables, which challenged his audience to determine whether they had good soil for a heart or not, what kind of heart they had that was willing to listen. And so Jesus even declared his power over Satan when he talked about being come to bind the strong man and plunder his goods. And we saw that when he's casting out these unclean spirits. So Mark's showing us who Jesus is, and he's also giving us insight onto the kingdom that comes, that Christ is bringing in. So now through this end part, this is a whole nother level of who Jesus is, and we can grab a new visual or get a new picture in our mind and of who Jesus is, of even what Jesus is. So evening's come, and Jesus is going to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. So he leaves the crowd and takes his apostles with him in the boat. And when I say boat, we get a picture in our mind of what kind of boat they were in. But archaeology studies and they found even remnants of boats and mosaics of boats and stuff like that that's been dug up. And so based on that information, the typical fishing boat held about 15 people. It was 26 feet long, 7 feet wide, and 4 feet deep. And so that's a pretty good size boat. How big is your bass boat, Mark? It's not 26 feet, is it? No. It's a pretty big boat, but by no means some of the boats that are on the sea today. But kind of give you a visual of how big the boat was. 4 feet deep and 26 feet long and 7.5 feet wide. And so this windstorm comes up. Great windstorm, and the waves are breaking in the boat. The boat's filling with water, and it gets bad quick. And so to us, looking in, it's just waves, it's just wind, it's just rain. How bad could it possibly be?
If the waves were coming over a 4-foot side, it's pretty bad.
That's why I wanted to explain how big this boat was. Okay? And I also wanted to remember and remind us they're not the only boat. Okay, there's other boats with them, smaller boats with them. So let's keep that in the back of our mind, because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So it's dangerous. The boat's filling up with water, and things are getting pretty hairy. So Jesus is asleep. Verse 38, he's just asleep. And the way the writer of this lesson is where he is kind of in the stern where you would sit, and then like on a bench, but then you could lay under the bench, kind of get out of the sun and rest. But this is not this is not a big cruise boat or anything where he's down in the bottom of the boat in a cabin asleep in comfort or anything like that. So Jesus is just on the floor of the boat, but what he's doing is sleeping. Okay. Now, why is that important? This is the first time we see Jesus sleeping. We've seen Jesus eating. We've seen Jesus preaching, talking, feeding, doing. Not once have we ever seen him rest, sleep. And that kind of brings back a more human side to who Jesus. He needed rest. He was a human. He needed rest. He needed sleep, and that's what he's doing. I can appreciate that because I'm a napper. I'm a napper. I've always been a napper. I don't know why. It's just part of who I am, I guess, in my DNA. I don't know. But I love to take a nap. That's one of my favorite things in the world. Take a nap and a hot shower. It's just, those are, and now I have a grandson, so there's three things that bring joy, now. But sleep, I can appreciate a good nap. So he's sleeping. He's flesh like us, and he's tired. So the water's coming into the boat. Storm is raging. Jesus is tired, so he's asleep, and he's sleeping through this dangerous situation that's going on. And it's so dire that, let's hear what the disciples say to Jesus in verse 38. They woke him up. Now, salvation. And in Psalms 65, the Lord is called our salvation, the hope of all of the ends of the earth, as he is described as stilling the roaring seas. And then in 107, the Lord delivers his people from their troubles and their distresses and makes the waters quiet, bringing them to their haven. All of these are pictures of God's love and rescue and his desire to save his people and bring them to their rest in the Lord. And so, as we look at that, we need to also remember the other boats. I don't know who was in the other boats. It doesn't mean I just now found out about the other boats, so I don't know who was in them, but they were also blessed by God. Okay, they were also they also received that blessing. Okay, now we can go down a rabbit hole with that, but they didn't hear. I can't imagine that they did. They didn't hear Jesus rebuke the wind and the waves. They didn't hear that. Okay, but they did know something supernatural, something happened. Okay, it wasn't normal. Something happened, and whoever they gave the glory to for that particular thing, we don't know, but we do know that the disciples understood at that moment, or started beginning to understand at that moment who Jesus was, and that's important for us to see who Jesus is. Okay.
You could just think, whenever they got to the other side, the people who said Jesus spoke, if you go, did you see what he did?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, you have to think that somebody's going to say something. Okay, and so it doesn't end. And we talked about that a little bit. The end of the whitewater rafting ended different than the end of the story here in Mark. So it doesn't end how we would expect, and it doesn't end how we would. I don't know that we're. When you're reading a story, you have an idea of how you want the story to end. You have a preconceived notion about how you want. You want either the good guy to win, or you want somebody to get away, or you want the two lovebirds to get together, or something. You want something to happen, and you have that idea in your mind. And when it doesn't happen, that makes you think, and that's what happened here. The disciples don't go up to Jesus and hug him. They don't thank him. They don't tell him, we're sorry we doubted that you cared about us. None of those things.
I think he was too busy being in awe.
And that could have been the case. They don't express any kind of, sorrow or being sorry for, not trusting that they were perishing and he didn't care. And so we need to understand that's not the message that we're looking for here. Okay, that's not the story that's being told. It's the message. It doesn't even compare to Jonah. Okay, we understand the story of Jonah and the sea and the salvation of that. And, it ends with the disciples being filled with great fear. Okay, great fear. Now, why are the disciples afraid? Well, there was that windstorm. Okay, that would have started their fear, and it's not an easy thing to go straight from terror to joy. There's that. You have that period in between those two where you're kind of coming down. And we can chalk it up to that. We can. Why are they afraid now that the wind has stopped and the sea's calmed? Why are they not filled with relief and joy? Why are they afraid? because the disciples realize they're in the presence of God himself, and we spoke about that. And this, throughout the scriptures, is it's always the reaction. Throughout the scriptures, that's the reaction when you realize you're in the presence of God. Isaiah, when in a vision of God's presence, was filled with fear. He recognized his own sinfulness. Ezekiel falls on his face when he sees the throne of God. Daniel falls on his face. The apostles Peter and Paul and John fall down before the Lord Jesus at various times. So the nearness of God in Jesus is pictured as it's an unsettling thing. It's a fearful thing. It's not reassuring. It's terrifying. And there's a purpose for that. And we talked about it. Jesus alluded to it. Don't you have faith? Don't you have faith? And so the fear is what's leading the disciples to faith. That's what's happening in the boat. The fear is what makes their faith possible. The fear has put them on the road to faith. It didn't just flip a switch and there's faith, but it has put them on the pathway to faith. And that's the kind of the way it is. Because it's I don't even know if it's the overcoming of the fear. It's kind of like the pilot in the whitewater rafting. Was he scared the first time he did that? Did he have fear the first time he did that? And the second time and the third time? And the fear level, I think, goes down as they begin to have a faith in their own abilities, I guess, or their faith in their knowledge of the river, or their faith in whatever, but it calms that fear, okay? And also, their relationship with the people on the boat or the raft almost requires that they don't have that fear, or at least don't show that fear. Because I don't want to do it anyway, but I wouldn't want to be on the raft with the guy that's just terrified of going in the water. You know, that's not the guy you want piloting the boat. And so, but when we understand who Jesus is, when we understand how he's come near to us in our faith will grow because we understand the need we have for Christ and what he does for us. And as we see God working in our lives, that builds our faith in God. Okay? Now, there are events that happen in our lives that shake our faith. Okay? That can shake our faith. Is that because we don't have a strong faith? Is that because we don't believe who God is? Is that because we don't trust that God has the power to do what we think God should do? I think the lack of faith or the weakening of our faith is on us. That's not on God. That's on us.
I think you're right there, that we expect something and we don't get it. So
Absolutely.
that hurts my faith.
That does.
I don't get the results that I want.
Yeah, and we're unwilling to, I'm going to say, we're unwilling to wait to see God's plan ahead of our own to let God help us build our faith. Okay? And so when we go back to the Exodus account, and the Israelites are being saved from Egypt, and the sea parts, and you know, in Exodus 14 and 30, thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. And Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and also in his servant Moses. Okay? So that fear, I don't know if as children you were afraid of your dad. My generation, the generation we have now, there's a chasm between the relationship that I had with my dad and the relationship that kids have with their dad now. But mine was fear. Absolute terror of my dad. That's the reason I didn't rebel. I don't know if it could be a personality, I don't know, but I never rebelled. I never challenged his authority. I never asked why. I never one time bowed up to, I don't know if everybody in here knows what that means, bowed up. I never one time bowed up to my dad, even when he was, in his 70s and 80s or whatever, no way. It just was not part of who I was. Now, my wife, on the other hand, not having anything to do with my dad, but her dad, okay, her relationship was completely different, okay? There was a fear there, but it wasn't the fear of her dad beating her to to within an inch of your life type thing. Her fear was disappointing her dad, okay? Never crossed my mind, okay? I was scared of the belt and all the other things that came with it, okay? My wife grew up in fear of disappointing her dad, okay? And so that just goes to show me that there are different fears, okay? There are different relationships with fear, and there are different relationships with, I have a different relationship with God than Mark or Bob or anyone else in here does, but that's my relationship, okay? And we're going to say the type of fear that I have that builds my faith will be different than the type of fear that you have that builds your faith, okay? The experience that I have that builds my faith is going to be different from the experience that you have that builds your faith. But the thing that we all have is we're all in boats, and we all got to share in that blessing of the calm sea. We all got to see, we all get to see what God has done, whether we realize it's God or not, whether we give the credit to God or not. There comes a time in our life when we see from the things in the past that there's no other way that could have happened unless God was involved. Okay, there's no other way my life could have been saved in a particular situation unless God was involved. Okay, and you've heard the I'm going to call it rhetoric of the religious world that God has a plan and that may be true. I'll ask him, when I see him, but we have to know that God is the creator, okay? God is the savior, and God is in control, okay? We forget that, because we like to be in control. Especially men, I like to be in control, okay? I like to drive when I go somewhere. I don't like to ride. I don't ride well. I like to be in charge of the plans, okay? I want to, I want to be in charge of the plans or the lack thereof, okay? Because I don't need a plan. A lot of times I don't need a plan, I don't need to read the directions. I never get lost. Not one time in my life have I ever been lost. Now, there's lots of times I didn't know where I was, but that doesn't mean I was lost, and there's a big difference, okay? So, as we see God around us, if we have to turn back to the scriptures. We have to turn back to the experiences that the disciples had with Jesus. And we have to notice God's power. Israel saw the power of God, and they feared and they believed in the Lord and they believed in Moses. The disciples saw the great power of Jesus and they feared. But what was that fear supposed to produce? Jesus said, "Where's your faith?" The fear was to produce faith in Jesus. And we know that it does because we continue to read all the accounts of the disciples, and their faith just continued to blossom, continued to grow, continued to get stronger. And so we can't have the faith God wants for us to have until we come into his presence and understand who he is. Okay? Not once did they mention the disciples being afraid when Jesus healed somebody. Not once did they mention the disciples being afraid when he fed somebody. Okay? Not once did they, never once were they afraid of any of that. Okay? But when they realize, when they come to the realization that they were in the presence of God, the God that controls the elements of the earth, that's when they started to realize, and that's where the fear came in, and that's when their faith started to build on what they had seen and how they understood. And so we have to come into his presence. We have to understand who he is. And so as Jesus rebukes the sea and it obeys him, Jesus declares that he has power and lordship over heaven and earth because he was doing and did what only God could do. And so in 2 Timothy, the Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen. It's not always a stormy sea. Okay?
You know, John, for all the miracles that Jesus did prior to that time, when he controlled the weather and the storm at the sea, that's taken it to a whole new level.
That's the whole new level. Yeah. And as we read through the scriptures, okay, as we read through just the account here in Mark, we can see, it just keeps building. It gives structure, and then it builds on that foundation, and it continues to build. And then we see here they finally have a realization of who they're dealing with, who they're walking with, who they put their faith or begin to put their faith in and their trust in, and who they're following. Okay, and now they're getting the realization of why. Why are they following? Because this is the Savior of the earth. Okay, and so this is what Jesus came to do, and this is our hope, because we get to see in the scriptures the immense power of Jesus as he rules over creation, as he rules over nature and the wind and the waves and nature itself listens to what Jesus has to say, and that's just awesome to me. But so with that great power, Jesus came to calm whatever storm we may have. Okay, and this can help to prove to us and help to start us on a walk of faith that not only is that what he came to do, he's able to do it. Okay? A lot of times we hear, God created, but we don't grasp that with that creation comes control, and with that creation comes the power to do whatever, more than what we could ever even begin to fathom in our mind's eye of what God can do. It's well above that. So he brings us safely to his kingdom. So as our fear leads to faith, because we see Jesus' power, he has that power to rescue us from our sin and bring us home. He has the power over everything and everyone. And as we worked our way through Mark, we can just see more pictures of that power as we go through. You know, we see. Why didn't we start with that? You know, why don't we just start with, you know, they're already on the sea. When Jesus calls the fishermen, they're already on the sea. Why don't we just jump in the boat and go out and start there and blast that faith into existence, okay? That's not how we work. We can see through the scriptures everybody that saw the miracles wasn't following Jesus. You know, we talked about that last couple of weeks, okay? The miracles didn't build that faith. The miracles were more of it's almost like they were an oddity, you know. Well, we've never seen anybody do that before. Go ahead, kid.
Well, in James, we're told that we're to count it joy when we fall into various trials, because that tries our faith, tests our faith, produces patience.
That's exactly right. He said we should be patient. Okay?
And it irritated a lot of people because he could do it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you see the full gamut of what the miracles of Jesus brought to humankind. Okay? Some people wanted to buy the power from the disciples. Okay? So they recognized, that's what I was going to say. They recognized that power and they wanted to buy it. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't fake. It wasn't some oddity. It was real, and they wanted it. Okay? Now, others realized it was real, and they wanted rid of it. Okay? No, nobody likes the spotlight to shine on their sin. That's not how we like it. Okay? We like to keep the sin in the dark and what we would consider good in the light, and so people don't get to see that. You know, we don't want people to see that. We don't want to admit to that. We don't want to get caught in that. We don't want to be confronted with that. We want the accolades and the things from this up in the light. Not this, but these things that are not these things. Okay, and so human nature tells us that's how we are. But we understand that God sees it all, and there should be fear there. And that fear should bring faith, and the faith will help do away with this and bring us into the light. And we have the arrogance to think that that's for us. Okay, that's for us. God brought me into the light for me. Okay, God forgave my sins for me. God stilled the sea for the guys in the boat. Okay? It wasn't just about the guys in the boat. Okay? Like Rick was saying, what do you think the conversation was when all the other boats got to the shore and talked to the guys that were in the boat? Okay? I'm in that boat so others can come and ask me about what happened. Okay? Others can come and ask me about my faith. It doesn't have nothing to do with my faith. It has to do with sharing God with others to build their faith, to share God with others to build their faith, and it's the perpetual thing. Now, do I get blessings from that? Absolutely. You know, I got saved in the boat too. I didn't drown. Okay, and so we can share those blessings. We can share that faith. We can share that experience, and all that does is just lift God up. And that's what we want to do, is just lift God up. Tell them about we're saved, You can, go on Yelp and talk about how great your whitewater rafting was, and even have pictures. But we need to remember that God is in charge. He created all and is all. And that fear just grows, builds, and makes our faith. So, and that would be the end of Mark chapter 4. And next week,
And the disciples didn't jump out and show everybody the film on the camera.
exactly. That's right. So, next week, Keith will be in chapter 5 of Mark, and we're looking forward to that. So, thank you for your attention and your comments, and